Day 1044 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 792,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,370 losses in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 4 tanks, 13 APVs, and 20 artillery. Then as for a different type of loss, as for the Russian currency reaching over 113 rubles per US dollar today, looks like the ruble is having another rough day at the office, dropping values significantly once again. The exact cause is sometimes up for debate here, although inflationary pressures and ongoing sanctions that battle against short-term counteracting measures put in place by the Russian government are all contributing factors here. Now, at the moment, the Russian currency value is just mere rubles away from all-time highs of 115 rubles per USD from a few weeks ago, but that's not including a one-day spike at the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war that saw the price temporarily devalue to about 130 rubles per USD. However, this is not 2022, and the array of options available to Russia for mitigating devaluation at that time no longer exist in any significant capacity today. Then headed across to the map, where reports are swirling that another Russian helicopter has been downed, this time a Russian Mi-28NM helicopter, shot down today, with Russian channels confirming the incident. The specifics are still murky, but it appears that this was a friendly fire incident by their own air defense forces. It's unclear how many more helicopters are needed to be sent skyward before someone in the Russian command realizes the consequences of their own air defense systems. And it was just a couple of days ago that a Russian Mi-8 helicopter was shot down by a Ukrainian naval drone just off the coast of Crimea. And at that time, it was said just to be the one shot down, with another making it back to base, but since then, new updates reveal it was not one, but 2 Mi-8 helicopters shot down. Not a good week for Russian aviation. And so now, Russian military bloggers are sounding the alarm that the situation on the Black Sea is, quote, drastically changed against us, where they stated that helicopters were the only actionable defense against USVs, that is to say, unmanned surface vehicles, which refers to a remote-controlled or autonomous vessel that operates on the water's surface. However, now that Ukrainian sea drones have proven their ability to down aerial targets, the Russian bloggers now state that helicopters used to neutralize the threat has been rendered ineffective. That is to say, the very tool in the Russian toolkit to neutralize naval drones is no longer an option because of naval drones, and indeed a new variety that contain anti-aircraft missiles on board. As such, they also said that Russia is, quote, suddenly playing catch-up to Ukraine's successful USV strategy. Then into Russia proper. Over the past day, there was a string of aerial UAV one-way attacks from Ukraine, reaching into areas including Tagnarog of Rostov, Smolensk, Saratov, and Voronezh. But then Russia had to also deal with more homegrown threats, including more Atesh partisan activity, this time in Russia's Tver Oblast, where the group successfully conducted a sabotage operation targeting another railway relay box, thereby disrupting supply lines from the 23rd and 107th GRAU arsenals. Those are the Frontline supplying large Russian ammunition depots in the region, known to stockpile Iskander missiles, TOC-U systems, and MLRS munitions. All of which now highlights the strategic hit to enemy logistics. Then headed down the map, but still technically in Russia, as there was further activity in Kursk just mere hours ago, as Russian Z bloggers report a strike on the dislocation of the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade for the second time in a week. According to their posts, this latest strike occurred during an awards ceremony for the brigade's troops in Ivanovskoye. The heavily embattled 810th never catches a break. Now, footage of the aftermath is already circulating on local Russian Telegram channels with conflicting reports about the cause, either a missile strike or, as was mentioned, a possible failure of a Russian aviation-launched glide munition. But either situation would not be a proud moment for the Russian military. Then headed southeast of Kharkiv to an update on this front where a circular defense is currently being devised around Izium and Balaklia. As confirmed by the head of the Kharkiv Oblast Military Administration, this strategic move is in response to anticipated shifts in enemy movements and priorities along the front line, providing a proactive approach to maintaining territorial integrity. Although this move might be considered especially proactive with, for reference, for the Russian army to reach this far in this direction, that would require them to travel almost the exact same distance as Avdiivka to the current front lines in the Donbass. Not to mention the need for the Russian forces to cross and operate from beyond the Oskol River, which at many points has a wider span than that of the Dnipro River that separates the northern and southern banks of Kherson. Then headed further down the map as a Russian soldier carrying a mine was hit twice, leading to this invader's permanent neutralization in the Toretsk direction. Then headed down the map to the Dashenska village just beyond Pokrovsk as Russian forces continue their hand in the region, but this time when trying to cross a stream east of Dashenska, 3 Russian infantry tripped in muddy conditions, were then spotted, then fired upon with the decidedly more conventional artillery shelling. Oh, and also for this front, recent footage shows Ukrainian trenches on the Pokrovsk axis built in just 1 month, which means the rate at which they're being built appears to be impressively increasing. Then at the opposite end of this axis, just south of Upsenivka, Ukraine's 59th Brigade has stepped up operations against Russian forces, engaging in a coordinated counterattack that resulted in the destruction of a Russian MRAP, likely a VPK Ural. There was also another Russian Desert Cross buggy in the mix and a motorbike as well, both failing to make it out of there successfully, destroyed in the process. Then to Berdyansk of Zaporizhia, and headed slightly back in time, where on November 22, a Ukrainian R-360 Neptune missile decisively struck a tanker in the occupied port city, with satellite imagery from Cyber now surfacing, revealing the aftermath of this targeted strike. Now, for a time there, it seemed as if Ukraine's locally developed Neptune missile existed more on paper than in reality, apart from, of course, the sinking of Russia's pride of the Black Sea Fleet early on in the war, the Moskva. But apart from that, the limited usage would be because the Neptunes were originally designed as a subsonic anti-ship cruise missile for engaging naval targets at sea, serving primarily as a coastal defense asset against enemy warships. However, since then, the Neptune missiles have undergone various upgrades and refinements, now featuring new variants that can strike land-based targets in addition to the naval vessels. So we very much expect to see more usage of these missile platforms into the future, alongside a growing arsenal of lower cost and seemingly equally effective hybrid drone missiles, now developed and readily available to Ukraine. Then taking a look around on the map, because somewhere in the east, Ukrainian FPV drones intercepted another 3 Russian Supercam reconnaissance UAVs. 1, 2, 3. Then also, we saw that a Ukrainian FPV drone attack was seen on a Russian multiple launch rocket system based on the 122mm Grad-21 launcher, but mounted to a Soviet MTLB armored fighting vehicle chassis. By no means a standard practice, but let's take a look at the pros and cons of this mechanical formation, shall we? The pros? Well, Russia found a vehicle on which to place the Grad launcher on top of, and then the cons? Well, the MTLB chassis may not comfortably accommodate the full 40-round Grad launcher system or its reloads. Plus, launch recoil and overall stability might be a concern on a smaller base, potentially affecting accuracy if not carefully engineered and braced. Other cons, the MTLB is relatively cramped, so mounting a large launcher system plus ammunition storage can be challenging. Plus, because it's an improvised solution, spare parts and standardized training are less readily available, as converting an MTLB into a rocket launcher can lead to additional engineering and logistical hurdles, reinforcing the roof or suspension, integrating fire controls, etc. So it's an almost all-round con. The Russian army shouldn't be, or need to be, slapping these two items together. Then headed on the map to Transnistria, because in a rather chilly turn of events, the Russian-aligned and self-proclaimed republic is now experiencing a gas supply crisis as the Russian Federation has halted gas deliveries. This has led to the abrupt suspension of gas, heat, and hot water across the region, leaving residents to fend for themselves in the cold, with the vast majority of residents being Russian these days. But worry not, because pro-Russian Transnistrian local authorities, ever so resourceful, have issued a dress warmly advisory, encouraging families to huddle together in one room and insulate their homes with thick blankets. It sounds like a joke, but this was the actual advisory. And so why did I say that the Russian Federation has halted gas deliveries to Transnistria, and not Ukraine? After all, Ukraine finally turned off the taps less than 2 days ago at the end of the year. Well, this is where the geopolitical complexity comes in, and the childish nature of the Kremlin. Because after what amounted to years of Ukraine finally making the decision to cut off gas transit from Russia through to Ukraine on December 31st, the Kremlin swung back verbally to this, where they officially announced that they were cutting off those gas transit routes through Ukraine to Transnistria, then onward to Moldova, due to some payment disputes with Moldova. It's almost like Russia proclaiming, "You can't dump me because I'm dumping you first," attempting to have the last say, all while leaving all the Russians in Transnistria to get caught in the crosshairs. And yet, being such a long time coming decision for Ukraine to end the gas transit agreement, Russia and Transnistria had literally years to prepare for an outcome like this. But no, instead, all Russia did was take a reactive approach, as per usual, and at the last possible moment, childishly act like they were the ones that made this cut-off decision all along. Meanwhile, Moldova can source gas from the international market, whereas Transnistria, not actually being a real country and full of Russians, is going to find it a bit more challenging to source alternative supplies on the global stage. What a Russian mess. Then headed almost next door on the map, as Hungary has officially lost out on 1 billion euros in EU aid, a consequence of failing to adhere to the bloc's rule of law standards. The EU's decision marks a significant moment, as it is the first time such actions have been taken against a member state due to non-compliance. The aid was contingent upon Hungary implementing necessary reforms by the end of 2024, particularly around issues like preventing conflicts of interest and combating corruption. The European Commission cited Budapest's persistent neglect of these conditions as it has failed to meet the required legal and democratic standards despite previous agreements to reform. The situation has been exacerbated by Hungary's stance on the ongoing war in Ukraine, where Prime Minister Viktor Orban has consistently obstructed aid initiatives, arguing they only serve to escalate the conflict. This reluctance aligns with Hungary's reputation as a Kremlin-friendly member of the EU, further complicating its relationship with the bloc. So there you have it. Hungary is now out $1 billion, or rather, even worse, €1 billion. Let's see how that goes down with the local crowd of citizens in Hungary likely further calling for Orban's removal, putting the pressure on. Then in some more news, the British Embassy in Ukraine proudly announced that 200 Ukrainian aviators have successfully completed their elementary flying training for operating F-16 fighter jets in the UK as of January 1st. This program not only covered fundamental flight techniques, but also ground operations and essential language skills, ensuring these pilots are well prepared. These pilots are now scheduled to proceed to advanced flying training provided by partner nations, a phase that will prepare them for transitioning to F-16 fighter jets, further strengthening Ukraine's air capabilities. And do note, this announcement of 200 aviators is specifically talking about pilots, not the air crews. So it's quite a substantial number. Although with the expectation that Ukraine is set to receive about 80 odd F-16s, many of which impressively come from a few small European nations, then these training volumes start to make a lot more sense. Then to a segment potentially worthy of the name Russian hardware news. Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued a directive for the government and state-owned Sberbank to intensify their collaboration with China in artificial intelligence technology. As detailed in Kremlin documents released on January 1st, this strategic move signifies a pivot towards bolstering technological partnerships with Beijing, especially in light of Western sanctions that have hampered Russia's access to critical technology. Now, Sberbank, one of Russia's largest banks, is evidently taking the lead in Russia's AI development. But it's an event that faces significant hurdles due to international sanctions, particularly in acquiring essential microchips and graphics processing units for AI applications. Despite these challenges, Sberbank's CEO has noted that the bank continues to source these crucial components through third-party channels, which essentially amounts to a clear admission of sanctions evasion. But it's likely the case that Russia will be one step behind on AI innovation in the military space, where they instead should have come from a position of leading the charge, as opposed to piggybacking off another country for the sector's development. Then headed across to some lowbrow humor, or not so funny, to round off the day, as reports are swirling that exiled Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad, currently residing under Putin's watchful eye in Moscow, was allegedly poisoned in what some are calling a targeted elimination attempt. Now, after falling violently ill this past Sunday, Assad, 59, was treated and managed to stabilize by Monday. While sources claim tests indicate poison was detected in his system, Russian officials are maintaining a conspicuous silence on the issue, which is pretty standard for any news that could disrupt the narrative. Coincidentally, this timing aligns with rumors of marital discord, as his wife, Asma, is reportedly seeking a divorce and looking to live out the remainder of her days in the UK. But as for Assad's latest cup of tea incident, presumably what it was given Putin's history, is something of an event that doesn't precisely reflect a show of support from the Kremlin, as the Kremlin otherwise aims to uphold its image of backing dictators, particularly in worst-case scenarios when they're ousted from their own countries. It doesn't garner a lot of trust for Russia by its allied nations looking ahead. I have my concerns for Belarusian dictator president Lukashenko, Uncle Luka. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for all the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!